like to introduce Mr. Cory Edwards, who leads Adobe's Social Media Center of Excellence, where he's responsible for the company's social business operations and integrating social media into the way Adobe does business. He and his team consult with and train departments across Adobe to define and measure their social strategies and identify opportunities to innovate and pilot new social business programs. Prior to Adobe, Cory worked as a director of social media at Dell, and at Symantec, he was the first full-time social media strategist. Cory and his wife and their 4 kids live near Adobe's Utah campus and not far from BYU, where Cory also works as a part-time adjunct professor. Now, it's important to note that Cory is a product of Wasatch County and its school system. He went on and did great things. So, hallelujah for that, right? And if we can just, one of the reasons we asked Cory to come up is so that we could try to twist his arm to have Adobe expand into Wasatch County. So with that, Cory, come on up.
All right, so I'm going to try to do this without the microphone. Can everybody hear me okay? If you can't, let me know and I'll grab it. The lapel mic is just for, I guess, the recording that they're doing up here. I will apologize in advance. I won't stand behind the podium because I'm a walker, and I feel like I'm at church if I'm behind the podium. So the last time I spoke in Heber, actually, speaking of church, the last time I spoke in Heber, I think was at my welcome home for my mission back in 1998. So it's been a little bit of time. I graduated from BYU in 95, graduated with folks like Ryan Davis, who's here. We were in the same class. A couple others were a year behind me, Ryan Taylor, Josh Wright. So really fun to see familiar faces, but it also makes it, this makes it a little more intimidating for me. I joked that I've kind of spoken at a variety of places. Last week, for example, I was at the University of Michigan's Business School, Ross School of Business, and talking to the students and faculty about the things we were doing there. And coming here, I'm much more sweaty and nervous than I was there, because if I make a fool of myself there or in some of these other places, I leave and I get on an airplane and they can talk about the foolery that I was, but here it means something. So hopefully I'm not too out of line with the things I say today and don't make too much of a fool of myself. I want to start by, I feel like you need to have a little bit of a background on who Adobe is. I think most people are aware that Adobe's got a really big campus now that sits just on I-15 at the point of the mountain. And many of you have probably driven by that. It's a really beautiful facility. If you want to come and take a look, you should. We give tours of the building. It's really an inspiring place. I like to take young men's and young women's organizations in there and try to inspire them to go to college and to get a good job and to work hard. What I think a lot of people don't realize about who Adobe is the way that the company's expanded. And I want to give this as just some background before we get too far into my presentation, because what you probably remember about Adobe, or what you are most familiar with Adobe, is probably the stuff from our creative side of the business. How many people here use Photoshop or Lightroom or Premiere or Illustrator or some of these really creative tools, all right? So hopefully if I were to ask how many of you had a good experience, those hands would stay up. The thing that most people don't realize about Adobe is that we've recently gone through, I think, a pretty significant change in who the company is. From being a company that was really just focused on the creative professional or the home creative professional, to being a company that also focuses heavily on appealing to marketing professionals. 5 years ago, Adobe bought a company that was based in Utah County called Omniture. Omniture at the time was the leader in web analytics, and it's continued to, that's kind of become a backbone for who Adobe is on the digital marketing business, within the digital marketing business unit. The company's expanded though, and we've gone from just a web analytics solution to now having 5 additional digital marketing solutions beyond that allows a marketer to do things like test and target their message and their ads, to do media optimization, to do things like social media, a campaign-specific tool, and even an web experience management platform that allows you to manage all of your web assets in a central place. And the vision that Adobe's had in doing this is they've kind of brought these two, you could argue they're pretty disparate businesses, and the argument has been that we want to go from, we want to take something that goes from the point of being a simple idea, the inception of a creative idea. We want to facilitate that with our creative tools. We want to take that from the inception of the idea all the way through taking that idea to market. So helping them to understand who their target market is, manage those assets that they're going to build, those creative assets, and then help them to socialize that, to optimize its presence online, and then of course to be able to measure how successful those marketing campaigns have been. So you sort of see this, really from cradle to grave, how Adobe can kind of help out in marketing as a company tries to go through the creative and marketing process. So I hope that's a little helpful background. The things that I'm going to talk about today, there are a couple things I want to cover. And for those of you that are sitting at this table, I apologize. It's going to be really hard to see at that angle some of the things that I've got on slides here. But really what I'm hoping to do today is I want to do two things. I want to educate you how a large enterprise like Adobe is using social media. The principles that I've been able to do, and I've been doing corporate social media for about 7 years now. I started doing it when I was at Symantec. Originally did more PR related things for them, but moved into a social role, ended up at Dell as the director of social media there, and then I've moved to Adobe. And the principles really apply across all of those businesses, right? You've got many Fortune 500 corporations, and a lot of the same social media principles are going to apply. It's a little different when we start to talk about the small or medium-sized business. And I know a lot of the people that are here at the luncheon today, that's the business that you're in. And you want to understand, how did those principles of social media from social media management, social media measurement, how does that ultimately apply to my business? And so I'm hoping to give some insights on how you can apply some of the principles that we've learned from our experience doing this at a large corporation. So here's a few background slides, and I'm going to move through these really quickly because I feel like this is some really it's important context setting. So all of these are going to be just really quick snippets. 92% of buyers now start their search for buying online. That's probably not a surprise. I bet most of you would agree that that's what you do. All right? 57% of the buying process occurs before anybody ever ends up talking to a salesperson. That means that more than half of the sales process is complete before some salesperson ends up talking with them. 84% of people trust personal recommendations, whereas only 15% of people now say that they trust the recommendations that a brand is giving them. You're seeing a big change in the world of trust. Trust no longer comes, people don't trust brands, they don't trust the CEO within the corporation. They trust their neighbors, they trust their peers, they trust their family. They trust people that they've networked with. 37% of buyers posted questions on social networks looking for suggestions before they ever made a purchase. I want to ask a question of you. How many of you would say that this applies to you? That you've gone on, maybe it's a community social network, it's your own personal Facebook page, and you've asked, raise your hands high, have you ever asked your network for a recommendation for something that you need? Maybe it's a new drill, it's a new saw, it's a new roof, and you're asking for recommendations, okay? So that number pretty much holds up. It looked like about 30 to 40% of you said that. 86% of consumers say, this is important, that they value brands that give them something that is useful as opposed to brands that are ultimately just interesting. This is important when it comes to content, and we're going to talk about what this means. But I think it applies I think that this quote applies in a big way here. This is from Harvard Business School. Theodore Levitt, professor at Harvard Business School, wisely pointed out, people don't want to buy a quarter-inch drill. They want to buy, what they want to have is they want to have a quarter-inch hole. And yet we seem to focus so much in our businesses on selling the tool, not ultimately what the solution is for them, what they want. What they want is the hole. So how do you take the things that we've just talked about, some of those really quick snippets that I think give a pretty strong argument to the idea of why social media is so important today. How do you take those ideas and apply those to your business to ultimately make your business a little bit more social? So the things I'm going to talk about today consists of how do you create effectively an operational approach to doing social media so that it's not ad hoc and that it actually is effective. How do you create content? And then the last one we're going to talk about are what are the small business considerations that we ought to think through on this. All right, so let's start with the social business operations. The intent here, we're going for consistency. We're really going for an alignment with business objectives. I can't tell you how many times in my career doing this over the last 7 years I've had someone come to me and say, hey, I want to tell you about my Facebook strategy. I want to tell you about my Twitter strategy or my Instagram or Pinterest strategy. And I look at them and I'm like, okay, please, do tell. And they tell me, and it has nothing to do with their business objectives. And I question them about how in the world are they so focused on objectives and strategies that ultimately are about a distribution channel and not focused at all on how that distribution channel ultimately ladders back to what the business is actually trying to accomplish. But we seem to get really focused in on trying to determine what's the use of Facebook and how can I connect with people. And it seems to almost be, in many cases, removed from what the business is trying to accomplish. To illustrate the frenzy that I feel like we've seen in the industry around social networks, I have a little video that we've produced that I hope you'll enjoy. I'm going to show that briefly here. Make sure the sound is up here.
Yo, bro, you on woo-woo? You kidding me? Everybody's on woo-woo. Woo.
Lock and load, people. We're going all in on woo-woo. Okay? Cory, comment up a profile page. Come. Susie, write us some posts.
Ready.
Grace, upload some videos.
Uploading.
I want sponsored boosts. I want targeted boosts. We want to be all up in your woo-woo feed.
Gordon, register a woo-woo handle.
Don't you know the Wu-Tang Clan?
Let's get them involved. We need an ethnically ambiguous woo-woo mascot.
We're cashing in the Q4 budget, people. And we're buying some followers. Yeah. Woo! 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 Dude, are you still on woo-woo? Nah, man. My mom's on woo-woo.
All right. I think the point on that is that we're far too often social network centric based on the network itself, as opposed to being social network agnostic, which is what we need to be. We should not get overly focused on the networks in and of themselves and look more at those as distribution channels that are going to help our business. Otherwise, we end up like this, this fake social network that we created called WooWoo, which was a really fun campaign. We created a whole website and all these social networking streams and worked with these influencers to really promote this fake network, but that was fun. So how we've done this within Adobe to ensure that we're social network agnostic, we've created what we call our Social Media Center of Excellence. Similar to the way you might see businesses have like a sales operations team or a marketing operations team, we've kind of created that for social media. Now again, granted, this is a larger company and we've got 100 people that are doing social media. So, and that is, I realize that in and of itself might be bigger than many businesses. The principles here I think still apply. The way that we've gone about this is by organizing at the core of everything we do, ensure that we've got strict governance to the way that we use our social media channels. So we regularly are doing audits to make sure that things that are happening on those social networking channels are appropriate. We have social media policies and guidelines. So it's governance. We have an enablement pillar within our operations group that focuses on really trying to help and to educate our broader employee base on how they can use social media. We've got a training program that I'm going to show you here in just a second that has been focused on teaching our employees how they can take social and use it as part of their day-to-day jobs, or just use it as a way to be an ambassador to our brand. We want to try to activate those ambassadors. Beyond that, we look at the other two things that we've centralized in social media has been our approach to measurement, which I'll talk about as well, because if I were to ask, and based on my brief just discussions with several of you before this, it seems like one of the things that businesses really struggle with is understanding, what does it mean, what's the value of having 200 likes? What is the value of having 30 people retweet my stuff? So what? What does that do for the bottom line of the business? So I'll talk a little bit about that. And then the final one that we've centralized in this operational model is just the approach to innovation. We have been so grassroots in the approach to social media as a society, and especially as corporations, that we're trying to centralize that innovation model and have a team that's focused on trying to figure out what's next. And we're working very closely in partnership with the social networks to try to learn about what's new and pilot new things as they come out.